welcome to Found in Translation, a weekly-ish exploration of one fellow's translation of the Christian scriptures, one chapter or so at a time. I'm Brandon Rhodes, and across the internet from me is the translator himself, Brandon Johnson. Hi, Brandon.
Hey, Brandon.
Good to see you this wonderful morning.
Yeah, good to see you.
Here at the end of all things Galatians.
Mm-hmm.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah, we're gonna be. How does it feel? How does it feel to be here? Like, we've gotten to explore now the third letter of this geeky project of yours.
Yeah, it's becoming more real. It's interesting seeing too, like, the skill. I feel like of my own skill of translating along the way. Like we're kind of going in rough order of when I translated, and
yeah,
it's evolving.
I think it'll be great to do a little recap in another few months or a year and just see, okay, now you've gone through, we'll have one episode just on Matthew.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you gotta follow up on
what
that.
would I revise? Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
what are
there's
you
definitely
finding
already
in
things.
retranslation? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So this week we're just going to be talking about Galatians chapter 6. So a few things we're going to be talking about. If you're going to read along on your screen, we're going to discuss, you can see this in the footnotes, but the yourselves and yous all throughout verse 1 kind of alternate between singular and plural. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about really the whole verse of chapter 6, especially if you want to see where we're going. Open up the ESV version, if you dare, and just compare Brandon's translation to that. It's totally in a different direction. I love it. Wow, I love yours, not yours. And then verse 8 gets into some stuff around the flesh and reaping corruption, and that's going to be some interesting stuff. And then finally, we're going to end back on verse 2. There's this language of Christ's Torah, which will be a good opportunity for us to kind of take an overview of Galatians as we've both come to understand it, both in the translation process and in the conversation along the way. So if you haven't had a chance to read that translation, you can find that in the episode notes in your podcast player, or if you're watching us on YouTube, you can just scroll on down there and find it in the show description. We always encourage you to check out the footnotes. There's a few of them in there. So go ahead, hit pause. We'll be here. Give it a read. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Let's start in verse 1.
It's a good place to start.
I thank you. I pride myself on my numbers.
Yes.
You want to give that a read? And again, folks are going to be listening for the different tenses of you and yourself and all that in there.
Mm-hmm. Family. Even if a person is caught regarding some kind of sidestepping, you who are in line with the life breath, restore them with a gentle spirit breath. Examine yourself so you will not also be tested.
Groovy.
Yeah.
So you notified me that the yous in this are not all singular.
They are not all singular.
Even though your translation did not acknowledge that.
It's it's a weird thing, and English just doesn't have the differences, and like unless we go like we've talked about before, y'all.
Some English does. Your Oxfordian ways are
I know
concealing the manifold wisdom of God.
Let's see. I don't know. There we go. I'm gonna change the color here.
All right. Yeah. So for those of you listening in, he is color coding the yourself and yous and families in this to denote.
Okay. So what I have here in yellow is family at the very beginning, and the you for you who are in line with the life breath.
Mm-hmm.
Those are plural. And then the next sentence, the second half of the verse, examine yourself, singular, so you, singular, will not also be tested.
Hmm.
Which at first glance was like, and maybe it just felt like changing it up. Except that Paul is really consistent in using plurals through all of his letters, unless he's being really emphatic about each individual. It's so there's a reason. There's always a reason he changes it.
And what do you think the reason is here?
Think he's talking to the community as it's the whole community's job to restore people with a gentle spirit breath. And in the next verse, carry each other's burdens. Like, that's the community's role, is to build people up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And holding each other accountable is part of that. But accountability, I always grew up hearing accountability is essentially like calling people out and making sure that they knew they were bad and you better change it or else.
Yeah. And usually about sex.
Very often about sex.
Yeah.
Yes. But accountability is so much more than that. It can be proactive. It's helping train people and support people, help people get what they need in order to like meet the expectation. There's so much involved in what accountability actually is.
I would just throw the word accountability out entirely as just Christian mumbo jumbo for abuse and control. Because what you're getting at is supporting one another to be fully awake and alive.
Even using it in more of a like business setting, it gets used in these really positive, proactive ways, but all of a sudden you start using it in a church setting and it's only about shaming people. And it's like, what? How does that?
Damn it.
Yeah. How does the false accuser have a voice in the church where it doesn't in business, of all places?
Of all places. He's like, no, Mammon's already talking enough over there. We good.
Yeah. But I think it's important to look. My footnote A here is saying essentially, I wish Microsoft Word would let me format this differently, but it doesn't. Yeah, I want this to be part of the same paragraph because it really is just a continuing the same flow of thought.
The preceding paragraph listing the fruit of the spirits
the end of chapter 5 there. And if you remember from last week's episode, if you haven't watched it or listened to it, do that. The list of things not to be and not to do is like 80% about being aggressive and hostile to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last verse in chapter 5 is we should not become people who project an empty reputation, meaning like we seem like we're so good, not being hypocrites of like we're kind, loving people, but really we're posturing towards each other, like that menacing and being envious or spiteful towards each other. Like, don't do that. So, family, even if you as a community catch someone regarding some kind of sidestepping, restore them with a gentle spirit. Those of you who are actually filled with this loving life breath. And while you're at it, examine yourself, you who are doing the restoring, so that you won't be tested, being tempted to be hostile and aggressive in your attempts at restoration.
Like,
that's what it's talking about.
Yeah, don't give the accuser of yourself a foothold in the process, like in the work of like coaxing out Christ-likeness and helping people get back on the path. That's really, really messy work. And it's really easy to let self-righteousness, superiority, judgment, shame, holy, unholy, all that. It's just the way of nature of being human.
Yeah, whether it's because you're impatient and want it to be good quicker, or if it's because you get a sense of satisfaction of like, well, I'm not doing that, so I'm pretty cool and they're not, or this is how I know I'm in and they're out and they need me to let them in, so I get a sense of satisfaction out of that. Like, whatever it is, keep an eye on yourself, because that's a when you are holding people accountable, or for getting rid of that word, calling people in,
Yeah.
um that
Restoring.
is a that's a time where we're tempted to be dicks about it. and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
don't and keep an eye on yourself, so that you're actually restoring and not shaming.
Well, and particularly this being the chaser to the shot of y'all who are in line, like it it takes a village, it takes a church to restore someone who's sidestepping, whatever that in this case means. Maybe being a dick, um, in some way.
Yeah, right.
Um, it's really
Yeah.
easy when we're all doing this together. It doesn't have to mean like we had a meeting and we all agreed with the path we're going to go down here. But if even if there
Mm-hmm.
is, it's a more diffuse kind of zeitgeist effort to like help restore somebody. Um, that makes it all the more like we are the holy ones. We are the ones who have our like poop in a group. We are the ones who have it. Sorry, our shit together. Um, yeah, I
Had
felt
some
weird about
interesting
it too, Brandon.
some
It's
interesting
okay.
visuals started coming to mind there.
Yeah, yeah. I first heard get poop in a group at a Christian workplace, a denominational workplace, and thought it was hilarious
Interesting.
because like, oh, you mean have your shit together? I know what you're saying.
Okay.
We all know what you're doing there, Flanders. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like that we're all in this together thing. It in of itself risks us all being a dick. So like
Right.
you individually, like do the work. If you're going to do the work of loving somebody in a way that says you're living a path of violence or greed or domination or aggression, let's work. May the life breath bring some life here.
Mm-hmm.
If we're all doing that together, it is still there's a space there for the power dynamic to happen. So check yourself before you wreck
Right.
someone else.
Right. Yeah, because it's the opposite here. It's like you who are in line with the life breath, restore them. So
Yes.
it's the people who are living out love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, being beneficial to others,
Yeah.
faithfulness, gentleness, and self control. You who are actually doing all of that, restore those who are not to doing that again.
Yes.
And make sure that you keep an eye on yourself, so you don't also stop doing that in the process.
Because yeah, it's not just about like stop doing the bad thing. It's like let the life breath do that love, joy, peace, patience, beneficialness on down the line. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's where it's at.
Yep. Gentleness and self restraint are important ones in there too. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Let's move down to verse 6. Can you read that for us and explain yourself?
Yeah. Okay. Whoever is taught the message must be given a share of all its benefits, along with whoever teaches it.
I'll go ahead and read the ESV right alongside that now.
Okay.
One who is taught the word must share all good things with the one who teaches. Now go ahead and read yours again.
Yeah. Yeah. Say that. Say it again real quick, and then I'll read
Okay,
mine.
yeah. The ESV says, one who is taught the word must share all good things with the one who teaches.
Whoever is taught the message must be given a share of all its benefits, along with whoever teaches it.
So the ESV is saying, uh, hey, if you're not in a teaching position or whatever in a local church, uh, you got to be like tithing so that the people who do teach get paid, which is I mean, it, apart from any judgment or critique or embrace of like people
Yeah.
being paid to be local teachers, they yours is saying something quite opposite.
Yeah, and I think technically the ESV's language there is okay in the sense that it's very literally technically correct. Like we tend to use share as I'm sharing with you, meaning I'm giving something that I have to you. But
Hmm.
what the language is just like both people get to share it, right? And so, but the context here is very clearly the people who are teaching, who are speaking into the lives of others, are trying to be beneficial, trying to restore those who are receiving the message. Looking at verse 1 again. So that's the emphasis of what needs to be really clear in verse 6 is that whoever is being taught must receive the actual like good news
Yes.
from the one who's teaching it. And yeah, having it even hint at being the other way around is messed up. It's promoting shearing the sheep, really. um
Damn.
yeah, it's not when you're in a position of serving and leadership and teaching, it's not for your benefit that you do that. Like you may find benefits like personal growth and again, but
Yeah.
that's not the point. The point is to be beneficial to those you're serving.
Hmm. Gosh, it's like great. I'm cool with like people being paid to be servants in a particular way in a local church. That's been a great and helpful and sometimes problematic thing in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And the ESV translating it the way they do is basically turning a passage about mutuality into
Mm-hmm.
exchange.
Right, right.
And there's no exchange around something like this in
Mm-mm.
the kinship family of God.
Yeah, your family, the relationship should not be transactional.
Yeah, yeah. As soon as you make it transactional, it like can't really love will win, but it's going to have to break some things to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, if you have someone being paid to teach you and stuff, don't be jerks to them either. Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
pastors and teachers are also people who deserve to be treated with kindness and love and patience and gentleness. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that's not what we're saying. That it should be going in all directions, but the emphasis of this verse
Yeah,
is towards who are receiving the message.
yeah. Well, and if anything, like whoever's taught the message must be given a share of all its benefits along with whoever teaches it. Um, you can't just be a traveling, I mean, you can, but like there has to be some space of mutuality in that person's life to be part of this flow of the fruit of the life breath emerging in humanity. That's a
Mm-hmm.
gobbledygook way of saying they can't just be paid speakers.
Mm-hmm.
They like
No,
that.
they're supposed to be part of the same family. There should be a relationship.
Yeah, they should be
Yeah.
cleaning the dishes and
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, everything that goes with figuring out how to be this, what does Willie Jennings say, publicly boundary transgressing kinship network
Mm-hmm.
that we call the church.
Yeah. Yep. And this whole passage is about really caring for people who are quote unquote sinning. Like that's what verse 1 is like, and then it talks about chapter or verse 2, carry each other's burdens, which makes me think of Matthew, where it talks about the Pharisees placing burdens on people
Yeah,
without lifting a finger to help them with it. And it's like, nope, we are going to hold each other to a standard, but we're going to help each other get to that standard, not just like tell you you're doing it wrong, better get your act together
yeah,
or else.
yeah. Preach.
And that's what verse 6 is about, is like when you're helping someone, like say, hey, understand you're not living in line with the standard, let's get there together. Like that's giving them generosity, giving them grace, being gracious with them, giving them good news, because you're saying you're not alone in this. I'm here with you. You still have value. We care about you. Let's figure this out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's getting the benefits of the message.
So let's go down to verse 8. Again, we're just going to do the whole verse. And this will be one of those, we'll just contrast it with the ESV right up front. So you read it, I'll read ESV.
Okay. There we go.
I hate to have my voice be the one on air being associated with it, but
Yeah. I'm going to start with 7 since it's one sentence.
okay.
But I'll let you know when I get to 8 since I think we only have ESV in 8 here.
Yeah.
Do not wander from the path. God is not snubbed. Whatever someone plants, this is what they harvest. And here's 8. Since whoever plants for the advantage of their own bodily impulses will harvest from their bodily impulses something short lived. But whoever plants for the life breath harvests from the life breath age long life.
For the one who sows to his own flesh will reap from the flesh. What? I said it wrong. Wasn't it bad? Let's try that again. For the one who sows to his own flesh will reap from the flesh. I did it again. Why do I?
Because their word order is awkward. That's why.
Yes,
not
sir.
like my translation never is, because it
Never ever has
but,
been.
Right.
For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. Now, the salient drama there is flesh and corruption, right?
Yeah. Yep. And keeping in mind what it's talking about in chapter 5 is that the stuff that comes from bodily impulses is sometimes self-indulgence, like substance abuse, alcohol abuse, that kinds of stuff, but largely it's aggression, using other people, hostility, being combative. That's the majority of the list, and what's being described as bodily impulses or fleshly behavior in chapter 5. And then, of course, living in the harvesting from the life breath is that fruit of the Spirit. Those kinds of things are what he's talking about: the love, peace, patience, gentleness.
Yes.
So the we've talked about flesh and all the baggage that goes there. Technically, it's correct. It's talking about the stuff bodies are made of, which is what flesh means. But flesh in the church tradition has come to hold its own, like, theologically weird meanings in addition to just the stuff of the body. Bodies are not bad. Bodies were created by God and called very good. And they're about, like, brains are survival organs, basically. It tells us what we need. And the difference is, like, do we just, like, impulsively in the moment just go based on whatever we feel like we need in the moment, or are we trying to hold these larger values in tension and make informed choices about which way to go? So it's, not the things that the body wants us to do are not bad things, but they need to be done at appropriate times and in appropriate ways. And those larger values of love, joy, peace, patience, etc., help us know how to do those in appropriate ways and at appropriate times. And then we come to the word where I've done short-lived, and ESV does corruption, which, again, technically not an incorrect word there, but if you're thinking about, like, corruption, like a fruit is corrupted when it's rotting because its life is over, its lifespan is at an end and it's decomposing. That's what the word corruption means there. And we, in, like, everyday speech, we don't use that for that very much. We almost exclusively use it in its metaphorical sense of rotten behavior or rotten motives, like a corrupt politician. But corrupt literally means, like, rotting. And we use it just mostly in its metaphorical sense in our culture, which is confusing here because it's talking about being at the end of a life cycle, being ready to decompose, and not like it's just super quick. Like if you just go based on the impulses now, I want sex now, I want food now, I'm angry, so I'm going to just act on that without thinking about it. Um, it's a very short-lived benefit that you get from that, and then it's over, and there's damage to be cleaned up.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever lives from love, joy, peace, gentleness, self-restraint, all those things, that leads towards a healthy, not just me, but a healthy community, leads towards the kind of community described in Torah, where the whole community is living towards age-long life in the land with
Yeah.
a healthy, hopeful community where everyone has what they need and everyone's treated well. But if you read this as like, if your evil body leads you to do evil things and evil happens from that, but if you are sows to the spirit, then you get to go to heaven when you die.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
what, man? Like, have you read the context of this at all? Like, this doesn't even make sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and like I know you're sticking with the more broad, like the more literal sense of like age-long life, like
Mm-hmm.
a more somatic like sense of it than
Yeah.
going to heaven. But I think there's an additional way, a bit more where I take this like that sense of whatever they have as eternal life, you as age-long life is in some sense participating in the life of Christ in this life, the divine life participating with us. So if you have this steady list of contrasts for the past two chapters of like aggression and dickishness and gentleness and hospitality and not letting what is tender to us become an obstacle towards other people's full humanity and worth, then the
Mm-hmm.
contrast is between um, bodily impulses leading reaping rot,
Mm-hmm.
and like that's just the path of death,
Right.
or the path of the fruit of the life breath, which is participation in the divine life. Apart from whether you go to heaven or how long you live, it's a
Right.
kind of a mystical quality.
Right. Yeah. Anytime you see aged long life, it's not talking about an individual. It's talking about the community. It's
Hmm.
talking about the
Oh,
the
wow.
vision of a future healthy community enduring over an age
Yeah.
in like the mythic sense, like an epic sense of an age,
Yeah.
um, that is described in Deuteronomy 28 to 30. That's where that phrasing comes from.
Mm-hmm. The Messiah age, in some sense.
Mm-hmm. The Jubilee, the new creation, the Messianic age,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The
one that's
way of.
full of blessings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which takes us to verse 2.
What? That doesn't come after A. I thought we
Be
decided we had our
strong. Be
counting down.
strong. Yeah. I, I am not as good at counting as you thought. Um, yeah. So verse 2, I guess probably starting again with that last sentence of verse 1.
Yeah. So I'll just start first one and two here.
Okay.
Family, even if a person is caught regarding some kind of sidestepping, you who are in line with the life breath, restore them with a gentle spirit breath. Examine yourself so you will not also be tested. Carry each other's burdens, and in that way you will completely live out Christ's Torah.
Hmm. Yeah, that final phrase is fascinating. Christ's Torah. Usually it's conventional translations is like Christ's law,
Yeah, or the law of Christ.
the
Yeah.
law of Christ. Yeah, which I was kind of surprised. Every other place that the word law has been shifted to Torah, I've really generally dug because of the problematic way that law has become something really weird and makes God into a legalistic booger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then here I was like, oh, I actually kind of miss the phrase the law of Christ. Like, look, here's the one guiding principle of Messiah, of Christ, and it's this. But then as I like got my hackles down and actually sat with this, it's a fascinating, I mean, it's a more faithful and healthier in other ways way of rendering this. We've talked about Torah instead of law in other episodes and other
Mm-hmm.
seasons as well. But here, it really enunciates the Jewish vision of, I mean, because Christ is, the anointed one is Messiah. So carry each other's burdens, and in that way, you will completely live out the Torah of the Messiah, the Torah of the anointed one.
Mm-hmm.
Or to riff a little bit further, the Torah of the one who brings in the age of promise and life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I like that you described law as guiding principle because I think that's a really good way to define Torah too.
Hmm.
Um, Torah, I think we've talked about this before. I mean, often it's translated as instruction,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more than just teaching in that kind of instruction. It's like a direction. It's instruction that gives you a way to know how to move forward. And it's even related to the verb to shoot, like to shoot an arrow.
Oh,
And so you
yeah.
can, the Torah is like the arrow that is shot to trace out the path, give that guiding principle of, which direction to move, to
Mm-hmm.
head towards that messianic promise, that new creation, that age of Jubilee.
Hmm.
So I think that all really fits rather than without the here are rules that you either have to keep or break or else.
Yeah, it's a trajectory,
You know,
not a, yeah, sequence
mm-hmm.
of
It's
rules.
it's not even explicitly about what you do. It's about how you do it. Are you doing it with love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and self-control,
Mm-hmm.
or are you doing it with hostility and aggression and self-indulgence and using other people? And the details of like exactly specifically what action you're taking
Mm-hmm.
are much, much less important. Not completely irrelevant,
Yeah.
but much less important.
Yeah. He's been spending this whole letter arguing from Torah about really a particular way of holding Torah as the
Mm-hmm.
people who are living as the first generation of folks who believe that the story of Israel is one where now others are being grafted in. The promise of all the nations coming to Jerusalem, flocking to Mount Zion, to behold the glory of God, behold the glory of God in Jerusalem on the cross,
Mm-hmm.
and the kind of grafting in that is possible, the kind of holy belonging that we are now living into, is set by God.
Mm-hmm.
Is set by the God who was crucified, take bearing the curse, the what's your word for it? Um,
Uh,
consequential
the
terminalities. I don't know what you call
declarations.
it. So.
uh, yeah, the harm, the impending harm that
Yeah,
comes
thank you. The impending
when.
harm and doom, Like he
Yeah.
takes that on in himself.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we're going to be grafted into that story now as people who aren't of Jewish descent um, is not apart from Torah. It's determined by Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
It's determined by Messiah, who has centered that teaching in Leviticus.
Mm-hmm.
Love your neighbor as yourself is the same thing as love the Lord your God.
Right. Yeah. And just here earlier in Galatians, it talks about that is the way to sum up the entire Torah is love your
Mm-hmm.
neighbor as yourself. And talks about how all the specific directions in Torah do not supersede the promise to Abraham that all nations will be declared worthy through him.
Yes.
Uh, Christ's rendering, Christ's living out of Torah centers those things.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that's in competition with those things, even if it's specifically following a particular direction in Torah, if at any point that particular direction comes in conflict with welcoming all people in and loving your neighbor as yourself, then that's not the particular direction to follow right now, because the love and
Yeah.
welcoming always supersedes everything else.
And that's the payload of Galatians. Like we've really leaned into this letter has been an experiment for us in really leaning into an extremely historically particular question that Paul
Mm-hmm.
is grappling with. The first question of the church is, here comes everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And what do we do with the God-given good things that got the story this far and have sustained us, and now we're feeling this tension?
Mm-hmm.
And that the implications of that are so steadily vast. We've dropped the breadcrumbs along the way throughout this season of whatever clear from our nature or from our denominational traditions or the teachings of the magisterium or our local church or communities membership or covenant or whatever it is. Those are all held to the Torah of the Messiah. Of is this everything you've been saying? Is it bearing the fruit of the Spirit? Is it love? Is it love and welcome? Is it solidarity? Is
Mm-hmm.
it recognizing that distinctions must not become divisions and destructions?
Right.
Whether that's
Belonging
male,
comes
female.
first.
What's that?
Belonging comes first. Belonging creates people who together figure out how to live out Christ's Torah, not you have to follow the rules in order to belong.
Yes. Yes. Brandon, I have to return the laptop stand I'm using to my wife for her podcast, Spiritual Wanderlust. Great podcast. Um, so you have 1 minute before we wrap this. How do you?
Yeah. I mean, I think just even teasing out some of the implications, just briefly, like Paul's example through all this thing has been circumcision, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, Torah says you should circumcise everyone who's following Yahweh, who's following the Lord, and following Torah and the path that the Lord has traced out. If that's making you treat people that's in a way that's not loving, forget about that circumcision and just love them, period. And that comes out towards if you have a specific idea about male roles and female roles that you're tracing from scripture. Okay, is that being truly loving though? If not, and you better ask the people who have the lower tiered role in the hierarchy
Sure.
how that's playing out. Then don't. It's not following Christ's Torah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are passages in Torah that talk about not putting a penis inside another male, and that is the wording in the Hebrew, by the way.
Wow.
Implication be actually being a male servant, though, so there's power dynamics involved in that. Okay, you've found a proof text to prove your point, but is that welcome? Is that putting belonging first? Are
Right.
you treating people with love? Are you making people feel welcomed and accepted and together figuring out how to live in love and joy and peace together?
Yeah.
If not, you're not living out Christ's Torah, you need to first focus on love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where I want to.
There we go.
So
that's great. Well, thanks everybody for joining us for this whole journey of season 3, going through Galatians. We've got. Should we tell people we're doing the 4th gospel next?
Yeah, I'm excited to go through John. Yeah,
Lazarus.
Yes.
That continued in a few weeks. Easiest way to support Found in Translation is to leave us a rating or a review wherever you're on, whatever app or player or website you're enjoying this on. It makes it easier for more people to find the show, whether that's YouTube or podcast apps. Second best way to support the show is to become a sponsor. You can do that for just $5 a month. When you do that, you get comment access to the Translations Google Doc, where you can be interacting with each of us and other members of the community. But you also get the satisfaction of knowing that you are supporting exceptionally nerdy independent media. You can find the link to join the community in the show notes. The music you're listening to is by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. Found in Translation was produced by Perry FM on unceded Chinook land. Goodbye, Brandon.
Bye, Brandon.
Bye, everybody. See you next season.